Hello and welcome to Türkiye Talks. This week we are going to talk about again upcoming Turkey's elections. The runoff will be held this weekend, but at the same time, important developments are taking place all around the world. Recently, we have G7 meeting, which also included Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, was invited. And also we had an Arab summit, Arab League summit, where the Syrian leader Bashar al-Assad was also invited, and he took his place in the family photo. As usual, I'm joined by Kadir Ustun. Kadir, hope you had a good vacation here. Actually, you worked here. It was not. It was a business trip, obviously. You observed what happened in Turkey's elections. You had your own dialogues with different people. Let's start with upcoming elections, if you like. A few more days, but it has been a very interesting 2 weeks. We have seen opposition leader making almost a U-turn in his rhetoric, especially when it came to bringing all parties together. But now we have seen that he's using a more harsh rhetoric. He sounds like a hardliner, especially when it comes to issues of Turkey's security. What do you make out of it?
Hello, Bora. Of course, it was, very interesting and busy times in Turkey to be there during the elections. It was very interesting. We got to talk to many people, and election night was very interesting as well. So it's a very lively moment in Turkey, and it has been like that for the past couple of months, but it became really intense last 2 weeks prior to the May 14 election, and then it went to the second round for the presidential part of it. At the parliamentary level, as we all saw, the ruling coalition, ruling partnership still prevailed in the parliament, and President Erdogan, had more than 2.5 million votes than the opposition leader Kılıçdaroğlu. And that was something very unexpected for the opposition, because they came into the elections, talking about comfortable margins. They were discussing, 52%, 54%. Some of them were like, 60%. And they were trying to obviously give their supporters moral boost and get them to come to the, ballot box. But turning out the vote comes down to organization at the local level, bringing millions of people to the election districts. It's not a very easy thing. A lot of people are registered in their hometowns. You need to arrange, buses, eat food and, drinks. It's a huge undertaking if you want the vote to get out there and get your supporters to come to the ballot box. And we saw major weaknesses in the opposition at that level. They thought they were just going to win based on the merits of their arguments, because of the current difficulties Turkey is undergoing, economic difficulties, post earthquake situation, etc. And it was a big disappointment for the opposition, and we saw that, like that night, opposition leaders appeared before the cameras. In my opinion, humble opinion, I think they failed even to manage that night. To be honest, they looked out of place. They were disorganized. They couldn't get their website up and running. So there are many things they bungled that night. But then, within a couple days of discussions, I think they try to now frame the election, which is going to take place May 28th, this Sunday. They would like to frame this as a new election between Kılıçdaroğlu and Erdogan. They would like that result to be forgotten about. And like you said, the opposition leader, seeing the strength of the nationalist vote in Turkey, he now has tilted towards the right. And he has taken an anti-migration, approach, and he has been using strong rhetoric to try to match President Erdogan's clear stance on the terror groups, and of course he's having a hard time with that. And I think it's going to be very difficult because on Sunday it's going to be simple choice between Erdogan and Kılıçdaroğlu. If people, voters really believed in Kılıçdaroğlu, we would have seen the sign of that in the first round. So I think the opposition will have a very tough night, and they I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I think all the push there, they have to push. Obviously, they're entering a major election, but that is partly geared towards reducing the the difference, reducing the percentage difference. I think Erdogan, is once again going to win. It's just a matter of what kind of margin. Again, ahead of an election, I'm talking a little too, maybe too sure of myself about this, but that's based on the fact that Bora, what I've seen on the ground as well, because people are extremely dedicated and committed on the ground to get the vote out and get the ruling coalition's messages on a number of issues to the voters. So this weekend, I see difficulties for the opposition to rally their supporters. In the first round, many people went to the polls wanting to vote for their particular party. Right now, the only motivation is for them to go for Kılıçdaroğlu, and I see that difficult thing for the opposition to do.
Yeah, I mean, when you mentioned the night, the election night, that you said that the opposition couldn't manage the night, really, I have similar observation, because I remember that night, President Erdogan, he convened a lot of people, maybe more than 1,000 probably. I know the AK party's, headquarters, so you have a big space to fill in, and it was crowded, and the president's speech sounded like a victory speech. He appeared victorious, and we have seen people chanting, waving flags. So there was enthusiasm in his part. When we looked at the CHP party headquarters, the building was almost empty. I mean, in front of the building, you could hardly see people there. Nobody was waiting for the speech of their leader. He spoke in a room where a bunch of journalists and maybe a bunch of parliamentarians were there. He seemed very upset. It was a short speech, and there was no sign of actually winning. I mean, hope even. When it came to these 2 weeks, the votes of Sinan Oğan became an issue. So he got something like 5%, close to 3 million votes, and everybody still is wondering where will they go? Who is going to get this 5%, or how it will be distributed? And we have seen that Sinan Oğan and his alliance, Ata Alliance, Nationals Alliance, also was split. So we have seen the candidate himself supporting President Erdogan, and the party leader, the Zafer Party, Party of Victory Party, went to the opposition. My observation is, again, AK Party and the president got the good part of this alliance, because Sinan Oğan seems more sound and he's more moderate when it comes to refugee issue, other problems. So he has his criticisms to the government, but at the same time, his approach is more modest than Ümit Özdağ, who is leading the party. He's extremely far right, and when you listen to him, it sounds like racist even. So do you think these votes will be split, and which candidate will gain more support, get the big part from this share of votes?
Bora, you summarized it nicely. The 5% vote, it wasn't a block vote, right? It was a combination of people who were obviously not, willing to support President Erdogan or Kılıçdaroğlu. They felt dissatisfied with either candidate. So within that 5%, which amounts to 2.8 million votes, there were a lot of people who just, weren't happy with the options, or they wanted to react. They wanted to show their reaction. And so they weren't easily aligned they cannot be shown as a block vote. I don't think, even without these deals between Sinan Oğan and Erdogan, and then, Victory Party and Kılıçdaroğlu, even without these deals, I didn't believe that this vote could be carried to either side in full, because it's a combination of different factors. But like you said, that kind of rhetoric, I think the opposition was hoping that Sinan Oğan and Victory Party together would join them. That way they could say that now they have, even a bigger block against Erdogan. But Erdogan was able to skillfully again do a deal with Sinan Oğan. Like you said, he sounds more reasonable compared to Ümit Özdağ, who actually claims that there are 13 million refugees inside Turkey, which is, it's hard to find a word, but it is ridiculous. There's no such number. There is more than 4 million. Maybe if you add the previous, like Iraqis, Afghans, and others, it could maybe come to 4.5, maybe. Let's say push it hard, like 5 million. Anyway, long story short, there's no such number, and he uses big anti-refugee rhetoric, and at times xenophobic, like you said. And I'm not sure if this is going to be beneficial for the opposition, because they've been trying to get the Kurdish vote. This is a very nationalist tilt towards the right, so it might push away votes as much as it brings. So and the ruling coalition president, the ruling coalition's candidate, President Erdogan, doesn't have to spend a lot of time trying to prove how nationalist he is, so on that level he has the credentials and advantage to his side. But we are seeing a situation where the opposition has many other problems too. The second biggest party in the coalition, the leader of that party, good party, Meral Akşener, she didn't appear after the elections for 5 days. And she said that she didn't want to make it about herself, and she had some excuses. But after an election result, as a political leader, you're supposed to come out and make a statement, show your stance, say that maybe you continue in this fight to the second round, etc. Whatever the message she was going to give, she needed to give that quickly to be effective. So I'm not sure how much her supporters are going to be motivated for the second round, and where there is no party voting for the party. You're just voting for the presidential candidates. But it is still a significant election. Earlier, I went ahead of myself a bit and predicted again an Erdogan victory. You never know in elections, but he has the upper hand, and I don't think this will change quickly in the minds of the Turkish voters. We'll see this Sunday, so after that, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, whoever wins, he will be in situation to deal with affairs, especially in our region. When President Erdogan took over in 2003 as prime minister, the Middle East was very different from what we have today. He witnessed the Iraq War, the second Palestinian uprising, the Intifada. So we had really difficult problems when it came to Turkey's neighborhood. There was this Afghan war, so he had to deal with all this stuff, and he successfully managed actually to control the situation. There were ups and downs in Turkish foreign policy. Turkey's relations with Israel was not easy. The Iranian nuclear issue has always been there. Also, I remember, he tried to clinch a deal between Syria and Israel, if you remember, in 2008-9, until Israelis betrayed, as President Erdogan said, Ehud Olmert, if you remember, the Gaza operation. But then we have the next decade of AK Party under Erdogan. In the Middle East, we have seen these Arab uprisings. I don't like to call it Arab Spring, because it's really different from the idea of having a spring. We have seen Syria was falling apart. Iraq, there was sectarian war. Iranian expansion in the region. Turkey's relations with Saudi soured because of the Khashoggi case. We have seen a lot of stuff, but the main problem for Turkey, especially in the 2010s until these days, has been the problem in Syria, the civil war in Syria. It seems that the things are changing. So whoever will be the president will have to take care of this situation. And sorry to make it long, but after 10 years, Bashar Assad, the Syrian leader, he's been accused of killing people, massacres, etc. But he was invited to Arab League meeting recently. And he's been in the family photo. He was kind of, he seemed to be winning the legitimacy back again. How do you see that developments? What kind of impact do you think it will have on the foreign policy of Turkey? It's already been changing, though.
Bora, as you summarized, the past decade has been crazy, right? We started with Arab Spring, and now many would claim it turned into Arab Winter. The initial push for democracy, people's representation, those hopes and dreams were largely quashed. Of course, it did have an impact. I don't think any, Arab leader feels as secure as they used to, prior to the Arab Spring. So it had its major effect on the region. But nevertheless, as you said, now President Assad made a speech at the Arab League. Some of those countries actually, tried to pull the plug on him. So they supported the opposition. most of them actually, and actively, some of them actively gave support to the opposition. And at the end of the day, Syria, Assad remains in power, but it's highly questionable to what extent he controls the country. There are Russian, military forces, assets on the ground. There's Iranians, there's Turks. Golan Heights, seem to have been, basically under the control of Israel. Syria doesn't even question that as much. Israel occasionally does military operations over their airspace against Iranian assets, pro-Iranian militias, etc. So it's a very different country where Assad continues to rule, and large portions of the country is under the control of sub-state groups, including, PYD supported by the United States. And then there's, of course, ISIS, Daesh in certain areas of the country. So, but a process to rehabilitate Assad is underway. And last year, I believe Algeria tried to bring Syria back into the Arab League, but Saudis didn't support it. This time around, Saudis basically appear like the kingmakers. So they brought them in, and it's thanks to basically MBS's blessing and sort of political clout that Assad is able to get back to the Arab League. And his speech was interesting. He talked about a multipolar world and how things are changing, and it wasn't a necessarily the usual criticism of the West was there, but it wasn't only about anti-West, but it was talking about different powers, global powers emerging, and of course it's Russia and China, etc. And that's a broader trend in the Middle East right now, right? Everybody's talking about we are going towards a multipolar world. There's Russia and China to counter, balance the West, and the region needs its own balance. I mean, at the end of the day, of course, regional countries speaking to each other, doing serious diplomacy with each other, I think that's good for the future of the region. Outside powers, let's say the United States, Russia, China, etc., can have a role, but often they will watch for their own national interest, and then the regional balance is often lopsided or tilted towards one way or the other. Within that, like you mentioned at the beginning, Turkey, whoever comes to power, the leadership, either Erdogan or Kılıçdaroğlu, they're going to have to deal with this reality, deal with Assad, deal with a Syria that is basically, continues to be a source of instability. There are terror groups. There is potential for refugees, further, displacement, and they're going to have to do a lot of things because it's a long border. We have refugee issue, terror groups issue. So whoever the leadership is, as of May 29th in Turkey, they're going to have to deal with Assad. The current, government, of course, in Turkey has been having meetings with the Syrian intelligence, Syrian security forces. I think there were 3 major meetings in Moscow. So we'll see how that evolves, but I expect that, along with rehabilitation of Assad and re-inclusion of Syria into the Arab League, Turkey will also seek, will eventually seek to normalize, but of course, there are these priorities, security priorities that need to be addressed first.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you know, the Syrian opposition has to come to terms with Syrian current regime somehow. There should be a new constitution. The Russians should be, you know, also on board. There is the problem of U.S. existence there, military troops still there, the YPG, lots of issues are there, but still that's an important development, and Turkey has already adapted to the new situation, started dialogue with the Syrian administration, also talking with the Israelis. Everybody is actually recalibrating their foreign policy. So Turkey will not be an exception, probably.
That's right.
Finally, before we close, I know that you followed G7 meeting closely. One of the problems, issues that the new president or government in Turkey has to deal with is this Russian-Ukraine war. Already, Turkey President Erdogan was able to clinch the deal again. He extended grain deal for 2 months more, which is a big success for him. How do you evaluate the invitation to Zelensky to G7 meeting? I think it was one of the most important meetings that he was invited so far since the war started.
Yes, Bora, I should just note something as you mentioned it. I remembered, you know, after the election, if Kılıçdaroğlu becomes the president, he's going to actually, based on the promises he made about returning the refugees within a year's time, he's probably going to have a weaker hand against Assad, because he's going to be in a rush to send refugees, and Assad regime, whatever they demand, Kılıçdaroğlu might give in more easily. And I don't think Erdogan is going to be in a rush. He will, of course, try to, because that's a promise by him as well, at least voluntarily, parts of, you know, about 1 million refugees they were talking about going back. But he's not going to be in a rush. I think he's going to have a stronger hand against Assad. And, you know, like you mentioned, Ukraine-Russia war is impacting Turkey directly, the regional economy, because Turkey has great, you know, trade relations with both Ukraine and Russia. And Turkey struck that deal about, you know, grain exports deal that has just been extended once again. Russia wants to, you know, keep that as a card to use in this war, right? They're not going for 6 months or a year extension. They want to keep, you know, that pressure on Ukraine. They want to keep that as a diplomatic card. Of course, Turkey managing to get that deal extended is a success, like you said, in itself. And then, you know, Zelensky went to G7. G7 invited him, but they were happy if he could just do it via Zoom or phone, but he insisted going there in person. But right before then, he also went to Saudi Arabia. So Zelensky is now trying to, you know, broaden the support from different nations. And I think he sees that US support and the Western support is not enough, first of all. Second of all, it might start to have detractors at home. You know, other parties like the Republican Party in the United States is already criticizing that. Trump is criticizing support for Ukraine. So he would like to broaden that support. And of course, Biden doubled down and he announced that F-16s could be given to Ukraine. They're not going to object. They're actually going to help train the pilots for that. So Biden is trying to show even stronger support for Ukraine. And then, G7 invited global South countries, India, Brazil, others. And that was significant, I think, because G7, they don't want to be looked like just rich Western club of countries. They want to peel away from India and Brazil. These are not countries that are on the side of Russia, but they would like to remain somewhat, neutral or third party. But the G7, by inviting them, they wanted to show to, Russia and China that these countries are not necessarily on the side of Russia and China. I'm making this long, bear with me, sorry. But the last thing is Zelensky, sitting next to the Indian leader Modi and, having meetings with non-Western actors. I think it's a strong message to Russia. Of course, these are all kind of messages given to Russia and China, but at the end of the day, it's going to come down to actual support materializing for Ukraine. And those developments, I expect President Erdogan, after the election, to do more at the diplomatic level with respect to this war as well, because it really directly affects Turkish economy and the regional affairs, Turkey's ties with Russia. So I expect a stronger even foreign policy outlook after the elections if President Erdogan is elected. If Kılıçdaroğlu is elected, he already promised to quickly, send people back to Syria and then align with the West a lot more against Russia. I don't know if he can actually deliver those promises, but we'll see what happens with that.
Well, with respect to everybody's vote, probably, if Erdogan wins and he continues as the president of Turkey, he will need no briefings. He will be, in position to act very quickly because he is in the business for the last 20 years and he can contribute to the regions and world's security probably. But at the end of the day, it will be the choice of the Turkey's nation, and we'll see it soon. Kadir, thank you very much. I hope we can review, we can talk about post-elections next week.
Thank you, Bora. Like we say in Turkey, may it be a blessed result for the country. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Hope to see you next time.